How to do your very first month's bank reconciliation. You know the first month's bank rec procedures must be different, or you would have just been searching for bank reconciliation. This video is going to give you the specific steps to reconcile the first month's bank reconciliation when you're reconciling an old account. If you are reconciling an account that you have been using for many past months, and this is the first month that you're reconciling, there will be specific procedures and steps that are additional to the normal bank reconciliation procedures that you will use for all future months when you do your bank reconciliation. In this situation, you will need to make something called a beginning balance adjustment. And this video is going to show you why you will need a beginning balance adjustment and exactly how to make it. Now, before we start, you should know that this video is the very last topic in the full bank reconciliation course right here on YouTube. So if you want to be sure that you understand all the previous knowledge necessary to follow along with me, you can look in the description field of this video right under the table of contents, and you will see a link to the full bank reconciliation course. Then you'll be very familiar with the statements, the numbers, and the reconciliation that we're doing. That will make this topic a lot easier to understand. So the fact that we have been using this account for many prior months before we started reconciling means that when we finish this first reconciliation, we will make a legitimate adjustment. And the only legitimate adjustment to any bank reconciliation is a beginning balance adjustment. You may well ask, what is a beginning balance adjustment? A beginning balance adjustment is an adjustment we make to the balance of our bank account at the moment we finish our very first month's bank reconciliation in order to make the beginning balance of the account what it should have been at the beginning of the month. You see, the laws of elementary school mathematics say that if you never originally entered a beginning balance and you're reconciling the first month, whatever difference remains at the moment you mark off the last one on the statement, that difference should be equal to whatever the beginning balance should have been at the beginning of the month. So, by making that beginning balance adjustment, you're actually establishing whatever the beginning balance was at the beginning of the month. And that's true whether you're reconciling the first month that you use the account, or if you've been using the account for several months and you just decided to reconcile now, the difference that you adjust for will still be the correct beginning balance. Let me prove to you that this is true. So here we are, back at the January bank statement, the same one that we reconciled back at the beginning of this video. Now, at the beginning of this video, there was no beginning balance. It was 0 because this was the first month that we were using this account, and we were reconciling the very first month. However, if I stick $50,000 right here and make that the beginning balance, even though the transactions will be the same and most of the reconciliation will be the same, the ending balance is now also $50,000 more, and we will see how this works out when we do our very first reconciliation. So we click the cog wheel and we go over to Reconcile, just like we did before. Now the date we're reconciling
is January of 2025. January 31 to be exact, because it's the end of the month. But this time, instead of putting 0, we're going to put the ending balance. The ending balance that was affected by the beginning balance, which was derived by many prior months of usage that we never reconciled. So the ending balance, 70,920, goes right here. And now we're ready to come down and click Start Reconciling. Now, we did this exact reconciliation with this exact statement with these exact same transactions at the beginning of this video. So I'm going to fast forward a bit. I'm going to forward to my favorite part where there's only 2 left at the end that need to be marked off. And we were here before. So now I'm at the end where these 2 need to be marked off. And if you remember what happened back in January, these 2 were uncleared at the point that we reconciled January 31st statement. So we do not mark these off, but we do finish up whatever's on the statement. And look what happens. At the moment that we finish up and mark off the second to last one that's cleared, the difference should only be 1,000. And when I mark off the last one that was on the statement, leaving the other 2 alone, just like I did before, instead of the difference becoming 0, you can see with your own 2 eyes the difference is exactly what the beginning balance was. So the laws of elementary school mathematics say that if there's a difference when you do your very first month, that difference should be whatever the beginning balance was that you never put in.
Now, some people tell me that they remember putting in a beginning balance. And when they get to the end of the first month's reconciliation, they ask me, why do they still have a difference? Well, that's because when most people put in a beginning balance, they are reading the beginning balance from the statement. And we already learned that there's always going to be a difference between the statement balance and the QuickBooks balance. So, if you get to the end of your first month's reconciliation, where you remember putting in a beginning balance, whatever difference remains, even if you did everything correctly, that difference could still be the difference between the bank statement balance that you actually put in and whatever was the QuickBooks balance at the moment you started reconciling.
And we all remember the reasons why your QuickBooks Online balance will always be different, or almost always be different, from the bank statement at any particular moment. So that might be the reason why you will still need to make a beginning balance adjustment. So you can go ahead and record any difference you have only at the end of the first month and have confidence that that is a legitimate beginning balance adjustment. However, is there anything else that the first month's reconciliation requires? And the answer is yes. Remember, we're reconciling after several months of using and not reconciling. So if we go to the reconciliation window and we put in only the current month's ending date and ending balance, you will unfortunately see in the reconciliation window all the prior month's uncleared transactions. Well, how do you deal with that? For example, let's imagine that we did not reconcile January or February, and our first month that we're reconciling is March, and we're going to put in the ending date of the March statement. Therefore, when we open the reconciliation window, we will see all of the previous uncleared transactions for January and all of the previous uncleared transactions for February, including everything in March that we need to reconcile. Watch. Now here I am in the March statement, and as you know, I undid all my previous reconciliations back before January, and now I'm imagining that the very first month of this account that I'm reconciling is March. So here's the ending date and here's the ending balance, $41,978.40. So watch what happens. We go cogwheel, reconcile, and we put in this number, and if you copy, you have to remove the dollar sign. This is the account we're reconciling, resume reconciling, okay? So we want to edit the ending date here and ending amount, edit info. So now the ending date is actually going to be, because we're pretending that we didn't reconcile till March, and the ending balance on the March statement was this, but they don't let you save it with a dollar sign. So now we're pretending that our first month that we're reconciling is March, and we copy the ending date and ending amount. Now watch what happens when I click Save. When we come back to the reconciliation window, we are seeing all of the January and all of the February, see, all of the March transactions, all the previous months in addition to this first month that we want to reconcile. What do you do? And the answer is separate all transactions that are dated before the beginning date of this statement and mark them as cleared. You heard me. Separate all the prior months that you never reconciled and just mark them as cleared. Once you do that, reconcile the current month normally, and whatever difference you come up with, you use for your beginning balance adjustment. That's it. So I could have just said that right at the beginning. Go to the reconciliation window for the first month you're reconciling, separate out all prior months, mark them all as cleared, then just reconcile the current month normally, and because it's the first month, it's acceptable to make a beginning balance adjustment. But then the question is, how do you separate the prior months? Watch. You see, once you put in the ending date, QuickBooks Online automatically filters the list of transactions for the ending date. But you can close that. You can click this X, and you can change the date. Instead of the ending date, instead of the statement ending date, you can go to the ending date of the prior statement. You can go to one day before the beginning date of this statement, and when you click Apply and come back to the window, you will only see transactions in all of the prior months that you skipped over and never reconciled. Now, you have no choice. If you never reconciled them, you have to assume that they all have cleared. That's the only thing we can do at the moment that we're making our first month's bank reconciliation. We assume they all cleared. So we click over here to select all of them and say yes, select all. Now all of them are selected, and when we finish March's reconciliation, which is the one we're really doing now, they will all be marked as cleared, and once you've marked them all as cleared, you can disregard them. You don't have to think about them, and you can just scroll down, focus on March, and do March's reconciliation. So you can watch as I leave all of them selected, and I click over to the filter and click Reset Ending Date. So after clicking to reset the filter, we can scroll down and see that only the March section has not been marked as cleared, and we can now focus on only the March reconciliation as if we were only doing the March reconciliation in the first place. And when we finish marking all cleared transactions in March, whatever difference you come up with, if you did not make a mistake, should be the beginning balance. Now I'm going to show you a practical example of this in the next video chapter. And the reason I'm waiting for the next video chapter to show you the practical demonstration is because a moment ago, when I told you it was standard procedure to mark all prior months as cleared, I told you we assumed they were all cleared. And if in fact they are all cleared, then you have all the information and knowledge and experience you need to go and start reconciling in any situation. But if you've been watching very closely, you know there's one more thing we need to talk about. If we assumed that all prior months' transactions have cleared, what if we're wrong? What if we marked everything as cleared as part of our standard procedure because we had no way of knowing whether they cleared or not, and then after we do our first month's reconciliation, one of the transactions we marked as cleared then suddenly shows up later on a future month's bank statement as cleared. Therefore, we must have been wrong when we marked it as cleared at the beginning. What do? Well, if you really want to know how to handle that very last situation that could possibly come up when you do bank reconciliation, then you have to watch the next video chapter and follow along with me step by step so that we can create that situation and see what happens if we do our standard first month's procedure and one of the transactions that we marked as cleared shows up later. That will truly make you an expert in bank reconciliation if you're advanced enough to follow along. So for those of you who have the courage, I will see you in the next video chapter.
So now I'm going to show you a practical example of exactly how to do the very first month's bank reconciliation under the circumstance that we're talking about here. We've been using the account for several months and finally decided to start reconciling now. So, to be absolutely clear, there are only 2 additional steps that you need to take when you're doing the first month's bank reconciliation under these circumstances. Step 1, isolate all previous month's transactions that came before the current month that you're reconciling and mark them as cleared. And in a moment, you will see how this works. Then after you do step 1, you would just reconcile the current month normally, the way that we learned. But when you get to the end of this reconciliation, whatever difference remains, you are allowed to assume that that difference is either the beginning balance or will adjust it to make the beginning balance what it needs to be. And then you would just agree with the adjustment, just like we learned in the prior videos. Now, step 1 is something you have no choice with. Step 1 says, mark all previous transactions as cleared. You have to do this because you have no way of knowing which prior month's transactions did or did not clear. And that's because you never reconciled the prior months. So go ahead and mark them all as cleared. Reconcile normally, and whatever difference you get, you assume it's the beginning balance and go ahead and make the adjustment. Now, most of the time, when you do these 3 steps for the first month, all prior transactions have already cleared and everything works out perfectly. But what if one or more transactions that you marked as cleared really didn't clear? It doesn't matter. You still have to do step 1 because you have no way of knowing which ones did or did not clear. But when we go to do our first month's reconciliation here together, I'm going to show you the more challenging situation. The more challenging condition is when we've done all the steps that I've already outlined and, unbeknownst to us, one of the checks in a prior month that we marked as cleared never cleared. And what do you do if one of those checks suddenly shows up on a future month's bank statement? So when we do our practical example together, step by step, I arranged it so that one of the prior checks that we marked as cleared shows up on a future month's bank statement. This way, you can see every possible challenging situation and you'll be prepared for anything that comes at you whenever you do your first month's bank rec. So I invite you to follow along with me step by step so you can have actual experience with this most challenging bank reconciliation situation. So the first thing you would need to do if you want to follow along with me step by step is to download the bank statement that we will be using. In order to do that, just click in the same place that you originally clicked in to download the first 5 bank statements and look closely where it says Alternative Reality Bank Statement. Go ahead and download them, open them up, because these will be the bank statements that we will be using in this practical example. So you will see when you open up this Excel file that these statements are the exact same statements that we already worked with, and they have the exact same transactions that we already worked with, but the only difference is Mark, your teacher, pulled out check number 2 from January's statement and placed it on May's bank statement as if check number 2 only cleared in May and not January. I did this so that you could see what it's like when you're doing your first month's bank reconciliation and one of the transactions that you marked as cleared did not clear. So of course, if check number 2 cleared in May instead of January, the only differences on these 5 statements are the beginning and ending balances. The transactions will all be the same, and if you've been with us during the entire course, then you will have already reconciled these exact statements. So, the only other preparation you need if you want to follow along with me step by step is to log in to your QuickBooks Online account and undo all 5 of the previous reconciliations that we did together if you're someone who has been following the entire course with us. So I am now going to demonstrate exactly how to undo all previous reconciliations and go back to the very beginning. And this will add to your knowledge of the undo feature that we just learned about in a previous chapter.
So again, we click the cog wheel and go over and click Reconcile. Once we're in the Reconcile window, again, just like we learned in the previous chapter, we click History by Account to have the ability to undo. Now, in the previous chapter, we only undid the most recent reconciliation. But what I didn't show you is that you can go back and undo any of these, and if you click Batch Undo, this will undo not only this month, but all subsequent months, and it will undo back to that point. For example, if I were to do Batch Undo here, Batch Undo, it will reconcile back to March 31. But what I would like to do to make things clear for this example is go all the way back to January and click Batch Undo. And in one shot, that will automatically undo all the reconciliations that we did in this course as if they were never done in the first place. And then we click Yes, And it's just confirming each of the statements that we're going to undo. It's confirming in one shot we're undoing all 5 and going back to the point that we need to go back to. Now, undo the batch, and now our account is in a condition as if nothing has been reconciled.
Now we're going to start reconciling at the end of March, and we're going to imagine we never reconciled January, we never reconciled February, and in a real situation, there could be many, many past months that we never reconciled. But 2 past months should be just enough for you to get the idea.
And just for the record, the transaction that I moved from January to May was a check for $1,400. That's going to be the difference that we need to make the adjustment for, and that's going to be the difference that shows up in May. Watch how it works. So here we are in the March statement under the alternative reality where check number 2 did not clear in January but did clear in May. So this would be the new ending balance of March, and we're going to pretend that even though we've been using the account starting in January, we're starting to reconcile in March. Now you'll see how it works. So we copy the new ending balance from the March statement in the alternative reality. We come over to our QuickBooks Online, click the cog wheel, and then we go down to where it says Reconcile. Now this time, the ending date is actually March 31st of 2025 in our little story. So we're doing March 1st instead of January. Now we put in March's ending balance, and be careful, it doesn't accept a $ as a character. Now, watch what happens when we click Start Reconciling. When we come to this window, you don't see only March's uncleared transactions, you see all the uncleared transactions starting back from the beginning of the account. Watch. I can see January 9, all of January's, see all of February's, and all of March's. So now we're going to do step 1. We're going to isolate all previous months and mark them all as cleared, even though one of them didn't really clear, because we have no way of knowing if any of them didn't clear. So we start off with the assumption that they all did. Now, the way to isolate every previous month is to come to this filter button here, and we're going to change it from the statement ending date to the statement beginning date, or really the end of the previous month. And then we click Apply. Once we click Apply, we have isolated all past months, and you now no longer see the current month in this list of transactions. So in one shot, we can mark cleared all the previous month's transactions, and then we can focus on reconciling this month. The way to do that is to click the summary button up here. Are you sure you want to mark them all as cleared? Yes, select all. Now, the difference is some random number until we're actually finished. So we finished step 1. We marked every previous transaction that was dated in a prior month as cleared, whether it really cleared or not. Now we'll fix the filter to re-include this current month that we're actually doing. Apply. Now you can see that the only ones that are not marked cleared are the ones on the current month, the first month that we're actually doing. And even though we did this before, we're going to do this again together, marking off the exact same transactions, but I'm going to go much faster because we've already done this before. Now you can pause the video and redo March step by step if you want to have more practice doing bank reconciliation. But what I did was I paused the video and I did most of March's reconciliation. I went all the way up to my favorite moment where there are only 2 remaining on the bank statement that need to be marked as cleared. Now, when I come back to my QuickBooks, I can see that I did not yet mark these 2 last ones as cleared. So watch what happens to the difference at the moment that we highlight them on the statement and then mark them as cleared in our QuickBooks Online records, the last 2 that we just marked off. Notice, at the moment we clear the very last transactions on the statement, in the first month, there is now a $1,400 difference. And as I said before, that $1,400 difference is because there's a check that we marked as cleared during step 1 that did not in fact clear. So if you did your first month correctly, the only difference that should be there should be anything uncleared that you marked as cleared. If that check cleared like normal, the difference in the first month would be 0, and all you had to do was clear all previous months, do March like normal, and you're all set. But because there was an uncleared check in the past, that difference shows up here. Now, there's nothing you can do about that difference. For all you know, you might have had several checks in the past for $1,400, and you have no way of knowing which $1,400 check in the past is the one that didn't clear. But you know something didn't clear, and you won't know until it clears in the future. So what do you do? Well, all you can do now at the end of the first month is make a beginning balance adjustment. Then as you do your future reconciliations, you will see it clear and you will make another counter adjustment to fix it. That's the normal procedure in the worst case scenario. So watch, we're going to save it and make our adjustment just like we learned. So we click Finish Now. Excuse me, the difference is not 0. We do what we learned. We click Add Adjustment and Finished. And then it says your account is reconciled. And if we want to see what the adjustment looks like, what we can do is we can go over to Reports, Custom Reports, and open our good friend, the trial balance, and you can see Reconciliation Discrepancies now has a balance of $1,400. Now, that balance will disappear when the check eventually clears. But when the check eventually clears, you'll have to make a similar beginning balance adjustment to wipe it out and make it become 0. And when everything zeroes out, that's how you know your account is correct. But the only way to do that is to wait for a future month when it actually clears. So unfortunately, we have to redo April's reconciliation together before we can get to the May reconciliation to see what it looks like when it eventually clears. So here we are again in the April statement, the corrected one. And this time, we're going to record the new balance into the bank reconciliation, the balance in this timeline, in this reality. So what we do is we go over to QuickBooks Online, we click the cog wheel, and again we click Reconcile. And now we're putting in the ending balance for April as if check number 2 never cleared. This is the alternative timeline, April ending balance. And of course, the ending date is April 30th of 2025. And then, of course, we click Start Reconciling. Now, we actually reconciled April twice in previous chapters. So again, I'm going to fast forward this to my favorite moment when we're only 2 away from finishing April's reconciliation. Now, here we are at the end of April's reconciliation, at my favorite moment, when we are only 2 transactions away from finishing the statement. And when we mark off the 2 final transactions, everything should work out perfectly. So we're about to clear a $450 check and a $500 deposit. Let's go ahead and do that. A $450 check, and when we mark off the $500 deposit, which was the last one on the statement, the difference goes to 0, just like it did when we reconciled April in a previous video chapter. Notice this $600 was drawn at the end of April, so obviously it did not clear until May because it's not listed on April's statement. So we therefore marked off everything on April's statement and left this $600 unmarked to get this difference of 0. If we click Finish Now, we will be able to quickly go to the most important statement, the May statement, where the check that we wrongfully marked as cleared now shows up as cleared. Now here we are in May's statement. And again, I'm going to fast forward because we did May already twice in a previous video chapter or chapters. So it's the same transactions, I'm just fast forwarding to the crucial moment. So again, we'll fast forward and cut to the chase. We're going to open up May's statement, the May statement in our alternative reality, and notice check number 2 from Betty Boop cleared on May 11th. But we actually marked that as cleared as part of our official beginning reconciliation procedures. So watch what happens. Now here we are at my favorite moment. There's 2 remaining to be crossed off the statement, and these are the remaining ones that are uncleared on May's statement. Watch what happens. When I mark off this $500 check and this $1,000 deposit, which are the last 2 on the statement besides the check from previous months that has cleared, when I go to mark off those last 2, 500 and 1,000, here's the 1,000, here's the 500, notice the remaining difference at the moment we finished everything on the bank statement that we found here, the remaining difference is that $1,400. Remember, we cannot clear this $200, this $125, or this $400 because these 3 are uncleared transactions that are not on the statement that will clear in a future month. So then what's responsible for the $1,400 difference? What's responsible is obviously a check that was drawn back in January that now cleared. Well, what can we do? We can't stop and record this check into our records and then mark it as cleared. You know why? Because this check is already in our records and we marked it as cleared as part of our first month's procedure. So clearly, this was a situation where we marked the check as cleared as part of that batch clearing at the beginning, and now finally this check has cleared. So now, what do we need to do? We now need to enter another second beginning balance adjustment. And now that the check that was wrongfully cleared really cleared, the only thing we have to do is make the adjustment and the balances will correct themselves. Again, do not re-enter it into your records. You cannot because it's already there. Do not mark it as uncleared because it was already cleared in real when we did the opening balance procedures. So the only thing we can do is acknowledge that there was a check, and now we know which check it was. So we can actually mark it off at the moment that we make the adjustment, because making the adjustment will account for that situation. Watch. Finish now. Hold on. The difference isn't zero. Adjust and finish. And now it's reconciled. Now let's take a look at the reconciliation discrepancy account from the trial balance. We click Reports, and we go to the trial balance, and we go down to the reconciliation discrepancies. Reconciliation discrepancies are now 0. We originally had a discrepancy of 1,400 because we knew we marked something cleared that never cleared, but we didn't know which one it was. So once we see exactly what we witnessed here in a future month, now we know which one it is. So we adjust again, and the second adjustment makes everything perfect, and now there are no reconciliation discrepancies, and everything is properly cleared.